Sally, hi. It's an honor to host you today in this candid and friendly interview. You are well known as the world's premier expert on women's leadership and international best-selling author, speaker, and leadership coach. You are a pioneer when it comes to women and helping women leaders around the world to recognize, articulate, and really act on their greatest strength. You are widely regarded as the gold standard when it comes to women leadership. And when it comes to me, Sally, and from my end, you're definitely a role model in the work that you have and continue to do in the women's space. I have personally enjoyed a lot reading your book, How Women Rise, of course, and have also, of course, written it with the number one executive coach, speaker, and author Marshall Goldsmith. It did inspire me a lot and landed a lot with my own mission for this world, the diversity and inclusion world, which, as you know, also was the topic of my recently launched book, Inclusion Starts With You. So today, Sally, I really hope to talk about How Women Rise as the recently launched book, I would say, or the latest launched book. And as you call them, the 12 habits or behaviors that hinder women from moving forward into their next career levels. But also, I would like to focus on and dig deeper into the diversity and inclusion space and how this book relates to that space, specifically that we will be talking more about this topic in the upcoming event in May with Right Selections, the Rising Together event, where also I will have opportunity to converse with you more on the one-on-one and the fireside chat. So thank you, Sally, for accepting this invitation for the interview, and welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
First, I would like to tap into the inclusion and start differently than the How Women Rise and talk about the book that you've actually published in 1995, The Web of Inclusion. I was personally fascinated to learn that you have talked about this topic 20 years ago, almost, and about how important inclusion is in the workspace and how it will help in the flow of information. But not only that, also how it can promote creativity and also sense of participation, which we call in the HR space employee engagement now. So knowing that inclusion has become a really big topic in politics, in governments, in regulations and workplaces today, I would like to hear from you on your opinion. Do you think we are moving in the right pace?
Yes, I do think we're moving in the right place. It's been fascinating to watch. As you pointed out, it was actually 26 years ago that I published The Web of Inclusion, a new architecture for building great organizations. And it was the first time that the word inclusion had been used in the context of business organizations and work. So I've been to some degree speaking about and addressing this topic for all that period of time. And what's been fascinating to me is to watch how inclusion has become paired often with the idea of diversity. When I put it out there, there was no relationship necessarily to diversity. And now we often think of diversity and inclusion as if they really go together. And I believe that they do, because as the workforce has grown much more diverse, in order to inspire and engage diverse people, you need to build an inclusive culture, because they are the most likely to feel as if they are not part of it. So I think that diversity and inclusion has been a very good pairing. And the other thing that you mentioned is the focus on employee engagement. And what I've seen in the work I've done for these many decades is that you can't engage employees broadly unless you build an inclusive culture, that those two just don't go together. And you build a safer, there's a lot of emphasis now on psychological safety. Inclusion plays a big role in that. So I think the progress has been fascinating. Part of what my mission now is to be a little more concrete in describing what creates an inclusive culture and how people can do that.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Sally. You've touched on the topic of diversity, and inclusion. And, in my experience and the space that I also tap a lot into, there's sometimes a misconception that diversity and inclusion is only related to the topic of women or women empowerment. And we kind of work and create awareness that, of course, I mean, diversity is beyond only having more women in the corporate and all of that. But one of the most important ones is women empowerment. We keep on talking women empowerment. And you're the expert in women, not only with the book How Women Rise, but also you've always been kind of tapping into that space. So with your experience, Sally, why do you think women empowerment is important, and who is supposed to empower women?
Well, ultimately, women need to empower themselves, and they need to empower one another, and they need to engage men in empowering more women. That's how it works. But it starts with yourself. It starts with your own ability to clearly identify what it is you most want to contribute to the world, identify a path for doing that, and then most importantly, identify who you need to engage. And that's how you begin that journey of self-empowerment. It's not just about, getting confidence and mantras, affirmations, repeating. It's those steps. What do I intend to contribute to the world? What is that would enable me to meet my full potential, but also really be of value to the world? And then who do I need to engage to help me? Because we never get there alone. So how do I begin to bring other women and bring men along with me on this journey?
Great. In the book, Sally, How Women Rise, you talk about 12 habits that hinder women or could become roadblocks for women to progress in their careers or the next level, whatever it is. So do you think any of those 12 habits also relate to men?
Oh boy. Since the day the book came out on April 10, 2018, that day I was on 6 radio shows, and 4 of them had male hosts, and 2 of those male hosts said, I want to talk about how this book impacts me, because I identify with a number of these characteristics. So I have begun over the years to think of How Women Rise as really about some of the habits and behaviors likely to get in the way of successful people as they try to move into leadership that got left out of Marshall's book. What got you here won't get you there. Marshall was drawing, and that was the inspiration for How Women Rise, was that book of Marshall's. But Marshall was drawing very much from male CEO base, and some of those characteristics didn't apply. So for example, with men who are engineers or in accounting or in professional services where you have very defined skills, some of those habits in the book, like overvaluing expertise and putting your job before your career, those can get in the way of men. And it's, of course, certainly there are men at various levels who struggle to claim their own achievements and are, deflect attention onto the team. That's not as common, but the overvaluing expertise certainly is.
And again, based on also my experience, I mean, International Women's Day was just around the corner, in March, and we've talked a lot and celebrated how, women have progressed. Many women have been inspired, and not only inspired, but really transformed because of How Women Rise. But also, I've been approached by a lot of men who says, we are allies. We truly understand some struggles of women. We're really supportive. We hire a lot of women on our teams, and we believe in their abilities. But what can we do more? So how can we be more allies?
Exactly. I think that there are a number of things, and we can talk about them throughout this period, but one of the things that I've seen is that How Women Rise is a very useful book for helping men in leadership positions understand what can hold back some of their women. You know, I've had so many men over the decades say to me, you know, we brought this woman in, we worked with her, we felt like we provided her with all these opportunities, and then when we offered her the next step in her career, the next job, she said, well, I'm not quite ready for it, or I really like the job I'm doing, or something like that. And they just floored by that response and don't quite understand how to deal with it, and recognizing what's getting in the way there with a woman, that she's putting the job before the career, that she may have too much loyalty to her boss or her team, that by overvaluing expertise, she imagines that she needs to have every single one of the skills that's required to do the new job before she starts the new job, which of course is impossible. Nobody is really qualified to do a job that they haven't done yet. So those are the kinds of things that can be very helpful to men. But I know exactly what you mean. I've had that question, you know, what can we do? I did this big construction conference in Las Vegas, and it was about 65% men. And I asked them, I said, what are you here for? How can I help you? And one of the guys stood up and said, you know, please don't waste our time telling us that we need to get better with women. We understand that, but we struggle to know tactically how to do it. And that's why I'm working on the book, Rising Together, because that's going to be an opportunity to address that.
Amazing. That's actually amazing, because as you said, we celebrate women, we've told women what to do, but sometimes we just miss the 50% and we exclude them. We talk about inclusion, and sometimes we get the feedback that men feel excluded, and this is definitely something that we need to tap into.
Yes.
And Sally, also I wanted to ask you a little bit about you. So you've talked about allies. And maybe, I mean, for me, again, you're a really role model in this space. So who was your role model in the journey that you've been through?
Well, I think I don't know about role model, but certainly my inspiration, one of my inspirations was Frances Hesselbein, to whom both Marshall and I dedicated this book, who was an extraordinary leader, to some degree a protege of Peter Drucker. Mm-hmm. And Frances was for years the leader of the Girl Scouts here in America. Mm-hmm. And then she went on to head the Peter Drucker Foundation. And she was just someone who demonstrated a highly intentional, very warm, inclusive leadership style, but she was also capable of holding people to account. Mm-hmm. And I watched her early on, and to some degree, you know, I do have, when I'm confused and when I want to know, you know, want to try to think my way out of it, situation, I always ask myself, what would Frances do? Wow. I was privileged to know her. She's still working, not that much, but she's 106. So, wow. Yeah, I went to her birthday in November, virtual.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, I was also a Girl Scout, so I can relate to the leadership capabilities and things that you learn really at an early age about leadership. And that definitely helps not only in the corporate life, but also socially. So I can relate to what you're saying. It's great to have someone.
True. And Frances really defined the Girl Scouts as a leadership organization, not just, you know, a bunch of badges and keeping girls busy after work, but as a leadership organization, which it had not really had that explicit idea before. So quite something.
Yes, absolutely. In the book, How Women Rise, so you talk about the 12 habits that hold women back. So which two of them do you think really are the most common that you see? Sorry, Sally, and the question is, do you think they differ by region? Because I work globally with global teams, India, China, US, France, and I'm based in Dubai, so again, a melting pot for expats. And with my experience in inclusion, I do feel that difference. So do you, Sally, think that also those behaviors differ by country or region?
You know, I've had a lot of experience with this because we've sold the book in 18 languages, and I have done the launches of the book in London, in Dubai, in Turkey, in India, in Brazil, etc., as well as working in dozens of other countries with it. And so I've had that, Japan. So I've had that opportunity to observe it. And what I see is the habits and behaviors that hold women back tend to be pretty consistent, which is why I think we're translated into 18 languages. But the ways in which they manifest and the ways in which women can address them can be different. Here's an example. In Japan, where I've done a fair amount of work, the reluctance to claim your achievements and expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions is practically built into the culture. Mm-hmm. And Japanese women who are trying to build a career don't see any path for being able to articulate and talk about what they've achieved because it's culturally taboo. But the way that Japanese men have traditionally done that is through building alliances so other people can represent them and can speak on their behalf. Mm-hmm. So that's to some degree, the path for Japanese women to get more skilled in terms of that, because it's so unacceptable in the culture for men and women to talk about that sort of individualism that's so characteristically often American. So I think that's different. Sometimes how they can deal with those habits is different, but that's been, I'd say, the biggest surprise in this book is how consistently, I mean, these very different cultures, Russia and Hungary and Finland and Brazil, what do these, Mongolia. So we have very different cultures, but women find it highly resonant.
I can, yeah, definitely excellent examples. And I kind of also could relate, when we talk about even inclusion, sometimes the way I see it is that even inclusion by definition means different things to different people. Like you talk in India, you say inclusion, people relate directly maybe to the different religions or ethnic culture. In the US, it's mostly more gender or even color. So it's also it's difficult to get to a point where we need to influence change or make a transformation, but at the same time you have to get to that base where people understand the terms in a way that is a bit more consistent. So
it's true, but really in global organizations, which is the dominant, employer often, so you're going to find the same kinds of definitions at Tata that you're going to find at Coca-Cola, because it's a global culture.
Absolutely. And also, Sally, so I would like to know a little bit about the leadership capabilities or qualities that also led you personally to move forward. I mean, within your career, you've had, successful publications of books, and you've been speaking a lot with, again, globally with a lot of women. So what do you think is the most important leadership quality that helped you throughout your career?
Me. Oh, nobody's ever asked me that question. That's so interesting. I think that what has helped me is that, and this comes from being a writer and having started off as a reporter, I think it's my capacity to really listen and to feed back to people what I hear in a way that, one, helps them, and two, helps them clarify exactly what they mean, because that's what you do. I did start off as a reporter, did a lot of magazine writing, then I moved to corporate communications, speech writing, and then in the late 80s turned to writing books about leadership based on everything I'd learned in the organizations I've worked in. So my work was listening to what people say and then formulating it, and with a constant interaction with them. Is this what you mean? And I always felt like the best comment, which was fairly frequent, that I had after doing an interview with someone for any kind of article or speech was where somebody would say to me, "You really helped me understand what I'm thinking." I hadn't realized it. I hadn't articulated it in that way. So I think that has been the strength, that has been the thread throughout the 50-year career that I've had.
And that is surely also an attribute of an excellent coach, right? Executive coach. They listen. That's their job. They listen and kind of help you articulate things in the way that that relates to you. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that experience. Sally, I would like to thank you, of course, in the last few minutes that we still have. I would like to thank you so much for the insight that you have shared. And on behalf of Right Selection, we look forward really to the virtual event in May, Rising Together, and would like to close by asking you, first, who in your opinion should be the right audience to attend and what to expect in this event?
Okay, two things. I'm very excited about this event because it's my first real Rising Together event. And this is the field I'm going to be working in for the next few years that I'm busy and in process creating. So this is a wonderful opportunity. Men and women at various levels in organizations can benefit from this by having we will drill down into the practical and basic manifestations of inclusion. Inclusion can sound like a kind of a topic that's all over the map. It's hard to get your hands around. But really, how does inclusion get demonstrated? By inclusive behaviors. This is what the lesson I learned from How Women Rise. Focusing on behaviors and breaking those down, what that looks like, is how you begin to build an inclusive culture. An inclusive culture is built through inclusive behaviors. So what we'll be doing in this workshop is we'll be looking at some of the triggers that can make that difficult. And then we will be focusing on what are 4 or 5 inclusive behaviors. What do they look like? How do they manifest? How can you practice them? How can you hold yourself to accountable for practicing them? That's the coaching aspect. And also in a position of power, how can you hold others to account for practicing inclusive behaviors? So that's how we rise together, is through the practice of inclusive behaviors, and I want to bring a lot of specificity and how-to to that.
That's amazing. And you know, it makes me really happy that you've touched on this. I mean, in my book, again, based on my small experience and years of, few years of in the HR space and as a D&I advocate, I also touch upon what I call the PBM, like policy, behavior, and mindset. And yes, it's true. It's not rocket science. It's really about how we can create awareness in the way that our minds operate and the way we see things and start to change. So again, if you can name it, you can solve it. So the way you start to be aware of that, this is how we can create change. So thank you again for saying this. And finally, any closing comment from your side, Sally, you would like to share with the audience today? Any closing comments?
Well, really just what I said before, it's very exciting to have this opportunity because Rising Together will be both a book and a workshop and probably a training program as well. So the fact that I have a venue this early in the process to be able to share some of the practices and have exercises where people can practice and dig down on how they can most authentically enact these behaviors is going to be, I'd say, a learning lesson for us all. So I'm very, very happy to be doing this.
Thank you. I'm also super excited to also seeing you in May and in the Rising Together event. I'm sure the audience is going to be looking forward to a lot of new things, and as you said, moving from ideas and theories into real practical examples of how we can influence and transform, not only inspire change, but really transform people and our mindsets and our behaviors. So again, Sally, I would really thank you. It was an honor to be able to talk to you today. And I will see you in May.
I'll see you in May, Sarah. Wonderful.